Tom, yesterday we tried to, as you know, to find a new theme for you. Did you yourself come up with anything? Did you do any homework?
No, the committee's still working on it.
Tell me what you think of this. We put this together for you. Tell me if you like this, Brian.
When
Tom Mulcair
talks, people listen.
What do you think?
Very original. Nobody's ever heard that one before.
Well, that's got to be 40 years old. Do you remember who that was for?
Yes, that was for Smith Barney.
No, it was for E.F. Hutton.
E.F. Hutton, oh gosh.
When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. They were a stockbrokerage, had a great ad campaign.
How did I not know this?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel out of the loop somehow.
Yeah. That was before you were born. Brian, play it again, see if it works.
When
Tom Mulcair
talks, people listen.
Okay, it could be a bit smoother, I agree.
It's the high level professionalism.
Yeah.
It's seamless.
It is seamless.
You added your voice in there.
That's Brian's middle name, Brian Seamless Calasar. So, yes, Natasha.
I would just like to apologize to Tom once again.
No need to apologize, Tom, is there? No, of course not.
None whatsoever.
Tom, let's begin by talking about the situation in Ukraine. We had a chance to speak to Kurt Volker earlier today, former U.S. ambassador to NATO. And I asked the question I thought it was really quite revealing. Now, remember, he's a former ambassador. The current position by the U.S. is no, there will be no fly zone. We've already discussed this and why. I asked him, though, based on everything else we've seen, if he thinks now, even though the U.S. has said there will not be a no-fly zone, that could change. And here's what he said.
So let's remember, we said that we were not going to put sanctions on Nord Stream 2 until we did. We were not going to sanction Russian banks in the SWIFT financial transfer system until we did. We said we were not going to ban imports of Russian oil until we just did that today. And we said that we were not going to support the transfer of MiG-29s from Eastern allies to Ukraine until today.
Makes good points. Obviously what he's saying there is, yes, we keep saying there'll be a no-fly zone, but as we see these images every day of people dying in the streets and that mass exodus of people, maybe that's the next to change. Do you agree?
Well, it's absolutely on the table, but the Americans have taken a very smart approach. It's a question of gradation of the sanctions. You bring it up, you ramp it up, it's bit by bit. You don't announce everything the first day. You announce 10 new oligarchs the next day. You add one more layer to the pressure being put on the Russians. One thing I did notice, though, is that the Dutch leader yesterday, when the Netherlands, Great Britain, and Canada were together at that press conference, the question came up straight. Would you guys be willing to, able to boycott Russian oil and gas? And the answer was, are you out of your mind? We haven't got anything to replace it. And so the same thing from the Germans. So I think that Canada's going to wind up in an interesting position here because there's a big play called Baie du Nord. Despite the name, it's in Newfoundland, Labrador. It's a massive petroleum project that's now been postponed twice with regard to its answer from Cabinet, and they're in the final phase. It can't be postponed again. And I think that you're going to probably hear some high-sounding talk, regret about the fact that we'll never meet our greenhouse gas obligations, but somehow Canada's going to find a way to drill, baby, drill. And instead of putting all our ability into having the most innovative approach to green, renewable energy, we're going to be right back to a petroleum economy. You'd think that Stephen Harper was there, but we're going to have a way of justifying it, saying we're just helping our allies.
Now, Biden has announced today that he's banning the importation of Russian gas and oils, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know that Canada represented more than half of the American oil imports. It's interesting. Mm-hmm. It's just over half. Russia represents barely 7%. So it's a drop in the bucket.
Okay.
And our prices are going through the roof just because the barrel of oil has gone up, even though, of course, Canada is more than self-sufficient. We're, as I just mentioned, we're important exporters of petroleum products, but we're paying for it at the gas pump as much as the Americans are. Biden did it very well today. He's talking to Americans. He said, look, I told you I was going to be straight with you, but I was looking at the cost in the United States, and I don't know how long it's going to take for the American public to start reacting to this thing. You can only build so many Teslas so fast. They're going to have trouble filling up their gas tanks. There's no question about that.
Tom, you just brought up a minute ago this idea of those Russian oligarchs that Justin Trudeau singled out yesterday, and someone asked the question, I think it's a fair question to ask, did he, by mentioning Alexei Navalny's name, put him in any more danger?
Probably not. I think that it was also a way of goring Putin's ox. I mean, it's just a way of going after them a little bit more, saying, we're listening to the people who are the most opposed to you. We know that there are people opposed to you, and we're going to talk about them openly in this sort of public setting. Trudeau again, he hemmed and hawed. He got the question straight up. Are you going to go in Canada? Are you going to go to the NATO norm of 2% of GDP as defense spending? Answer, well, blah, blah, blah. He starts talking with his hands. So, I mean, we're not even doing that. With regard to a no-fly zone as the next ramp-up, everybody's going to give you the same argument back. Oh, Putin's already started talking about nuclear weapons. But that's just a sign of Putin's instability. There's been as that was put on the table today in the U.S. Congress, there's been no change in the posturing on the nuclear level from them. I think that the biggest surprise for everybody, of course, is the fact that Ukraine is still there. And, we've got all the armchair experts saying, well, we give them Crimea as if it was ours to give. And, the Donbass pseudo-states, maybe there'll be a diplomatic solution that'll go home. Putin couldn't have been clearer. Ukraine does not exist as a country. And he's intent on proving that because he's just going to absorb it and make sure that it no longer exists, even though Kiev was there hundreds and hundreds of years before Moscow was founded. So it's the situation that we're in. We keep believing that we can talk to someone who has become irrational using rational arguments. I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, I think I agree. The question is, what will it take before, or how much more will we have to see? And the world is watching this, as they say, right? We see these images every day. And I know we talked about yesterday about perhaps the world getting tired of this, but it's difficult to watch this on the news every day and see children who have lost parents, people dying in the streets before someone sits back and goes, okay, it is worth the risk now of getting involved before this entire nation is wiped out.
Exactly. And that's why it was so important, the speech that was given to the British Parliament today. Zelensky was brilliant. He showed his acting skills, of course, but he also showed his statesman skills. Mm-hmm. And he was calling the Brits out using their own arguments. In 1940, the Brits stood alone. The Americans hadn't ended the war yet. They came up with this clever Lend-Lease system to start pushing equipment into the hands of the Brits who needed it, and the rest of the empire, including Canada, had started helping to the extent possible. But that summer, that time before the Americans were really fully joined in the battle, was crucial for the history of the world. And if you look at the planet now, we went through 75 years at the end of the Second World War where the large powers always balked at any risk of going after each other. So we saw the horror in Hungary, in Budapest in the 1950s, when the Soviets moved in and crushed any thought of more freedom. They did the same thing in Prague. The Prague Spring of '68 with Alexander Dubček moved in, the heavy tanks, crushed the thing. Then the Soviet Union flies apart. And we're still living the jagged edges of that separation. This is what this is about. The Russians under Putin simply saying, we want to have overtime on the end of the Cold War. We don't like the way it ended. We want to have another chance at this. And now they're going after countries like Ukraine. They've already got Belarus and their puppet government there. And they want the same thing in Kazakhstan on the other side. And Ukraine, big important piece in the middle, as a buffer between them and the West. Where would they stop? And all the arguments that are being used against doing everything now would also apply, even though it's the question of NATO or not. But look at a country like Moldova. What's going to happen if and when Putin simply decides, this is another piece I can take. It's not in NATO. So that's why we have to be asking ourselves these tough questions right now.
All right.
Tom, we were talking to Tasha Kurdian just in the last hour or so about her not running and also her backing Jean Charest, who, of course, is going to announce that he's going to run for the leadership of the Conservatives on Thursday in Calgary. Now, she said that is all about bridge building. What do you make of him doing this announcement in Calgary?
Well, it's the cleverness of what you're going to get from Charest throughout this campaign. He's a deeply experienced politician. He knows that his weakest suit is going to be the West and energy. That's where Pierre Poilievre, who's riding, is actually in Alberta. So he's got a home team advantage. So it's as if Poilievre were to make his announcement in Quebec City of his candidacy, and trying to steal out some of Charest's turf here in Quebec. Charest is going out there saying, I've been a federal politician. I know what it is to try to hold this country together. I can talk to you seriously about energy policy, the oil and gas sector. I'm not an adversary. Look, and this is the real test I would suggest to you for 2 days from now. If we look at that press conference, and he's got several MPs from the West, and he's got, for the sake of argument, something in the 30 to 40 range of MPs already lining up behind him, I think this is going to be Charest's race to lose. Poilievre doesn't have the heft, the experience, or the expertise to fight against that. He's going to run, it's almost compulsory, an almost exclusively negative campaign, but that doesn't show people that he's got what it takes to run a G7 country. Charest basically gets to look at conservative voters and say, look, here's what I can offer. I know how to win elections, and then see whether or not they take that away.
Leslyn Lewis, Patrick Brown entering the race, no difference?
Patrick Brown's an interesting character. He was really hard done by. Some very scurrilous things said about him that knocked him out of the race against Doug Ford. Ford wound up winning it based on that. There's still a lot of bad blood about that. Leslyn Lewis, I don't think she's a player.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I agree. Okay, so listen, but just before we go, I'm dying to hear your perspective on this. So the Benoit Charette debacle at the Dynasty Gala, he's giving a tribute to black artists who passed away, including one who had not passed away, was very much alive and actually in the audience. Tom, how does this happen?
I don't know who they fired on their staff in the meantime, but I thought that the way they handled it was just about as perfect as you can do it under these horrible circumstances. It was just, remember that TV ad, what you do in the case of a fire? You just stop, drop, and roll. They just stopped. They didn't try to offer up any sort of justification. It was just an outright, simple, flat-out apology for a major screw-up, and they said, we couldn't feel worse than we do. I think that most people will have moved on from it, but it really is a mystery as to how something like that could happen. We were given something in the order of an explanation that he tried to lift off his page, because it's much better when somebody's got a text, but they can actually look at you, and he sort of skipped from one section to another. In other words, in one place it was supposed to be we were in homage to people who had departed, and in the other, people who were there, and he sort of managed to put those two together with the result that you just described.
I love the part at the end. And imagine how embarrassed it is to stand up on stage and say, I'm so sorry that this person has left us. And then they're sitting a couple of rows back. And he said, he looked at it and he said, I didn't have my glasses with me when I read that. I thought that was lovely.
My death are greatly
exaggerated. Exactly. Tom, thank you very much. Listen, no pressure, but I expect you tomorrow to perhaps suggest a song for an intro, just so I don't do all the work here, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.